This week on The Grit Crusade, if your life, where you're at in your seat, keeps going the same way 10 years from now, you're going to land exactly where you are right now. Do you like that? If you do, woohoo! Celebration emoji for you. But if you don't, hashtag Newton's first law. Hey, Grit Crusaders. My name is Brooke, and I'm your host here today on the Grit Crusade podcast. And I'm so excited that you're tuning in with us. If it's your first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. This is the place where we get real in the trenches of life, relationships, and business and talk about the real stuff going on in your lives each week. And today's episode is no different. So before we get started, I just really want to ask you to follow our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any episodes. Or if you're tuning in on YouTube, be sure and give us a thumbs up so that you'll make sure and help us spread the word to everyone else as well. So today we're talking about getting back on track. So this is for the people who you have realized that you are not going quite where you want to go and you've backslid just a little bit. So if you missed the last episode, which was taking control of your life, give it a listen because this episode is going to start with assuming that you do know where it is you want to go in life, but you kind of got off that path a little bit and need to tune back in to where it was you originally intended to go. So we'll be sure and link last episode or episode 59 in the show notes as well for you guys. And if I have that episode number wrong, it'll be in the show notes. So today, let's start with talking about some signs that you may have gotten off track a little bit. Here we go. First, you're complaining more than you're seeking solutions. Like you had this really good plan, but then all these bad things happen, and now you're not doing what you wanted to do, and it's because it's somebody else's fault. Ugh. Or are you letting others' behaviors control your emotions? Jeff Metzger is a mentor of mine, and he runs a huge facility, youth recreational facility in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he taught me years ago that you cannot give someone else control of your mental health. So when you have expectations of other people and they are not acting the way that you want them to, and all of a sudden now you're all upset and your whole day's ruined, that's not going to help you get on track and stay where you want to go. Or maybe you realize that you're off track because you're not using your time wisely. Are you seeking to escape in your free time? Every time you're not working, are you playing video games, watching porn, spending way too many hours on Netflix or TikTok, and you're not actually doing the hobbies and activities that you enjoy? You're not working that side hustle like you want to. Maybe you realize you're off track and self-doubt is winning. You've gotten into a place, and I have been there. I'm raising my hand for those of you who are listening on the podcast platform. I have been there where I've started telling myself that narrative of, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. This is not going to work. This is not going to go the way I wanted it to. What am I going to do? And it is a deep, dark spiral, but it is a surefire way to get yourself off track. Or maybe you're living for others. You're in a busy season of life, caregiving for children or aging parents. And everything that you're doing is just about somebody else. Maybe you aren't smiling or finding joy in things that you once did. Or maybe you truly have never defined your goals and what it is that you want to do in life. And today we're going to tackle that because if these things sound familiar, then you might just be off track. Now, this episode is very unique in that I'm going to be making some, you ready? Scientific comparisons. I know, and I'm not even a science girl. I'm not even Brooke Nye, the science guy. That didn't work. I tried. Anyway, yeah, definitely no Bill Nye over here. So stick with me because if you can grasp how I'm relating being off track to Newton's 3 laws of motion, it's going to be like, you know that emoji with the mind blown thing? It's going to make a huge difference in the way you approach your day today and your day tomorrow. So here we go. Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest remains at rest. And an object in motion remains in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless it's acted on by another force. Okay? So first law, motion. Object in motion stays in motion. Okay? Second law, how fast the object goes, the acceleration of the object depends on how big the object is, the mass, and the amount of force applied to it. So if a car is going really fast down the road and some car hits it sideways, that's a big force. Okay, so first law, if it's in motion, it's going to be in motion. Second law, to change the motion, you got to have a big force to change it. And third law, whenever one exerts a force when one object exerts a force on another object, the second object exerts an equal and opposite force on the first one. All right, so how does this apply to your life and getting off track? So I told you to stick with me because here's our scientific laws. So first step is we're going to look at Newton's first law. So the first step to acknowledging that your life is off track is bringing awareness to your trajectory, okay? So let's assume 10 years from now, okay, from today, you do nothing different. You change nothing. Where will you be 10 years from now? That is your trajectory, okay? You may like it. It may be good, but you may also not like it. So because according to Newton's first law, if that trajectory is not acted on by some sort of force, that's exactly where you're going to land in 10 years, okay? But you must have a change big enough to move that force or move that line. So how does this show up in your everyday life? Goal setting, goal achievement, and goal crushing, okay? So here is your trajectory. Here's your line. I've got my arm up in front of me for you guys listening online. If your life, where you're at in your seat, keeps going the same way, 10 years from now, you're going to land exactly where you are right now. Do you like that? If you do, woohoo! Celebration emoji for you. But if you don't, hashtag Newton's first law, okay? You've got to take that trajectory and put a force on it to move it even a little bit in a different direction and to get you back on track or the track that you want to go on. All right, Newton's second law. You like my science stuff here? Here we go. So Newton's first law, object in motion stays in motion unless something affects that motion, right? All right, second law. The acceleration of an object depends on the mass of the object and the amount of force applied. So if you have a tiny paper clip and you push it downhill, it's not going to go very far. But if you have a giant steam engine and you push it downhill, that's a huge object, huge force it's going to take, and it's going to take off in the direction that you want to go. So how much of force that you apply to getting yourself back on track will actually impact what changes in your life. And this comes in the form of, listen for it, your habits. I know no one wants to talk about habits, but they're so important. So remember that your life is a trajectory, and the direction that it goes depends on the kind of force you are putting on the trajectory. I didn't make it up. Newton did. James Clear talks about in his book, Atomic Habits. And if you have not read Atomic Habits, we will link it in the show notes. It is huge. But he talks about the power of 1%. Okay? If you improved your life only 1% each year, each month, each day, that compounded effect over time is astronomical. You will not recognize the 10-year future version of yourself. So 39-year-old Brooke will not recognize 49-year-old Brooke if I am adhering to the power of the 1%. So I put this in a calculator because I decided that since I was going to be a science girl today, I might as well also be a math girl, I guess, right? So if you were only operating at 1% of your capacity today, so you would basically be like a sloth, right? And you increased 1 times the effort per month, not even day, month, at 1% interest, so 1% growth, you would be 126% better than you are today in 10 years. And that's only improving 1% a month. Can you imagine what would happen if you improved 1% a week or 1% a day? I'm not asking you to go change the world. I'm asking you to change one tiny habit and get you to realize the amount of compounded effect that can have over time and how much that could change your life from today, the 10-year future version of yourself, because that is what we call life-changing. All right, before we go to Newton's third law, we're going to take a science break and we're going to dive into my favorite part of the podcast, trivia in the trenches. So if you're new here, this is where I ask you a question, or if I have a guest, I'll ask the guest a question, and I try to stump you guys to see if you know the answer. All right, here we go. According to the traditional rules, what color of poker chip has the highest value? Black. It's $100 poker chip. I am a poker player, and I didn't even know that. So I used to in my 20s, maybe I should say like I'm a former poker player because I haven't played in a long time. But I used to go to a Wednesday game out in this little bitty kind of backwoods community called Oak Grove, north of Little Rock, every Wednesday night when I was a school teacher in my early 20s. And I would play in this shop outside with all these old men. We'd play Texas Hold'em until the game was over. And it was like the funnest thing ever. Like the things you do before kids, right? And so anyhow, so there's my story. And then I used to also go to Tunica and play there too, which is a casino in Mississippi, close to Arkansas. In my last poker story, I gotta tell you one more. Here we are. All right. So in college, I went to the University of Arkansas, which is in Northwest Arkansas. So for you geographic unnerds like me, Arkansas touches Oklahoma. Okay, Oklahoma is Indian territory. That means they have Cherokee casinos, and you could gamble at 19. Oh yeah. And so I would take $60 and take it up there and gamble in a 4-8 game of Texas Hold'em to make my utility money. So then I would have extra money to go out to the bars on the weekend. That was it. There's my poker story. So back to our trivia, which is about the chips. There's actually white, yellow, blue, red, gray, green, and orange. But yellow chips are hardly ever used now because, and this will make sense, they're valued at $2. Kind of like the $2 bill is hardly ever used anymore. So, but black is the big one. So, all right, back to our topic today of how we get back on track now that I got off track. Onto our trivia in the trenches. So first we identified that we must set goals because if we are in motion, we got to be in motion somewhere and we've got to figure out where that's going to be. And the second law tells us that if we push the trajectory one way or the other with a great enough force, and we identified that if that is our habits are going to change the trajectory of where we want to go. And so this is how daily habits have changed in my life. So if you've listened to very many of my podcasts, you've probably heard me talk about Michael Hyatt, but I am a full focus planner user. And so for you guys watching on YouTube, I am showing you my full focus planner. If you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, then we'll link a full focus planner in the show notes. But these are quarterly planners, and in the front of them, they have what are called rituals, daily rituals. So Michael recommends having morning rituals and evening rituals. So for example, my morning rituals go like this. I get up and brush my teeth, and then I go put laundry in. What? I know, it's something that happened last July, and it changed my life. So every morning, I get up and brush my teeth, I grab the laundry basket, I come downstairs, and I immediately put it in the washing machine. It's usually about 4:45 in the morning. And then I go on and I go work out. Well, first I make my lemon water and my celery juice, and then I go work out. And by the time I'm done working out, guess what's done? The laundry. Put it in the dryer. It dries for 20 minutes. I fold it and I put it away before I ever sit down at my desk and get started for work. It's a game changer. It has changed my life to not have to do laundry on the weekends because that's a responsibility I have, my family, and now I don't even think about it. But those tiny little habits can change into what you call rituals. Most of you probably have a ritual of brushing your teeth. You don't think about it. Stack another habit up next to it, which is a tip from James Clear. And now you've started to put enough force of change in your life to change that trajectory. For me, you guys may have listened to the gray area drinking episode. It's one of the most listened to podcast episodes where I talk about how I got out of the habit of having an alcoholic drink every single night for 15 years. And a lot of that has to do with sparkling water. I like the sound of a cold beer. I love it. Oh, and I like the fizzy, cold, almost burning your throat. It's so cold drink going down my throat. Sparkling water does the same thing. So those tiny little habits add up to make astronomical change and force in our life, change the direction of where we're going. Newton's second law. See, there's how science ties in. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Newton's third law before we wrap up today on how we get our life back on track. So first, we need to set goals. Second, we need to evaluate and establish habits, or maybe add or remove a habit. All right. And then the third law of motion, whenever one object exerts a force on another object, so like hands pushing together, the second object exerts an equal and opposite on the first. If I fall, the amount of force of my body falling is going to hit the ground and I'm going to feel it because the ground's pushing back. Okay. Theoretically speaking, this happens in life, and I like to call these growing pains. Okay. And this shows up when you start a new business, when you expand a business, when you have a child, when you end a relationship, when you change jobs, when you move houses, when you're recovering from an illness or injury, when you're overcoming cancer, when you just had surgery. These are all major forces in our life that feel like that the world, the universe is pushing back. And so if that is somewhere that you have been recently, how do you get on track? You do what it's doing to you. You push back harder. You don't give up. You don't say, well, I tried to start a business. I tried to move houses, but you know what? I'm just going to go back to that old one. No, you ain't, Betty. That one's sold. You can't move. You got to make it work. You got to figure out where to hang that stuff up. My husband and I live in a 1904 house that had no closet, no drawers, no shelves, nothing. And I remember we had clothes just piled on the floor when we moved in, and he looked at me one day with his hands up in the air and goes, where does the dirty laundry even go? And I'm like, I don't know. We didn't even have a washer and dryer hooked up. But guess what? We had to figure it out because we had done sold that other place. Okay? You can't give up. You have to push back harder. And like, yes, moving into a new house is evident. But guess what? When you decided to switch jobs, you committed to that new company. Give it all you got. You can do it. You can do it. Newton's third law tells us it's going to push back harder. So we shouldn't be surprised when it's hard, because hard is where the good shows up. Hard is where we get creative. Hard is where we go back to our roots, to who we are, and remembering that none of the stuff we did earlier was easy either. That shit was hard. But you have 100% success rate of getting through hard days. And that is how we get our lives back on track. We set those goals. We change our habits to align with those goals. And when life pushes at us, we push back harder. Because you know what? We can do this. You can do this. Until next time. Thanks for listening to The Grit Crusade. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClintonCreative.com.